Hey guys, Marcus Melnick here with Firearm Mentor. Hope you're enjoying my YouTube channel. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. These little things are free to you and really help the channel. I appreciate your support. Enjoy. Thank you.
The views expressed are not those of local community broadcasting, WYML LP, or its management, volunteers, or underwriters. Greetings and welcome back to the Personal Safety Show. This is Marcus Melnick from Firearm Mentor and Stress to Logic. And we are continuing the conversation with Raymond Brunner from Adult Protective Services and Lifescape.
When you asked about what does Lifescape Services do, here's all I can tell you. And I've only been with the organization just under 6 months. Again, our main headquarters is in the Rockford area. My focus in the last 6 months has been to establish the footprint here in Lake County, to get an office open, to train investigators, to get out there and fill the gap and investigate the problems that are going on. We don't have all the services that Rockford has at this point, but we work with different agencies in the area, which there are just a plethora of, to try and get those services to people. So I'll just say Catholic Charities, they still have the domain of the Meals on Wheels. So we reach out to them. We have a good relationship where we do our referrals and say, hey, we've got someone in need, and they've been fantastic. I think within 48 hours, if you've got nutritional needs and we become aware of it, you will have Meals on Wheels delivered to the house within 48 hours.
That brings up a question. So I have a little bit of a narrow view just because of my background, and I'm going to ask you to expand that view. I worked for a couple different agencies, and one of the agencies that we had, we did have some one significant self-neglect. It was hoarding. It was McDonald's cups full of urine throughout the house, feces, and a person never took off their socks, so their skin grew into their socks, and they needed medical assistance, and that's how they got to access the system. How are you notified that someone might need help other than if, say, the paramedics needed to transport them to the hospital and they see that the house is in disarray? And I don't mean like a teenager lives there in disarray. I mean like serious health problems. How do you get informed of these types of cases?
There's what's called the mandated reporter. And a mandated reporter is typically a professional involved in the healthcare system, in law enforcement, something of that nature, where when they see something, they have to say something. They have to report it to the authorities. And the authorities, in this case, are Adult Protective Services. So a majority or a vast majority of our cases come to us through, just like you said, the EMTs who get called to a house for one issue and then they find multiple issues. And usually when an ambulance arrives, the police do a law enforcement assist. So either one of them have the ability or right to call us. Sometimes we actually get 3 calls or 3 reports from 3 different agencies on the same incident, meaning the EMT delivers the person or transports them to the local hospital. The police officer who did the assist also calls APS saying, hey, we saw this while we were there. And then we get a call from the ER nurse indicating, here's what conditions we found on the person's body. We've got concerns. So what do we have? We've got one reporting what the conditions were in the house. We've got one reporting a medical problem that they had to transport the person, which suggests self-neglect or possibly passive neglect or willful deprivation by someone who should be looking after their needs, who isn't. And then third, we get the report from the actual medical personnel themselves, then updating on us what actually additional medical issues are surfacing. And that's always good because 9 times out of 10, this isn't the person's first time to the ER or that hospital, which means they've got a chart. They've got access to what else is going on, which helps us when we communicate with their case managers to understand the big picture. How long has this person has diabetes? Is that affecting her health or his health to the point where, like you said, the skin is breaking down because they're not getting the proper nutrition or the proper medications to treat it with insulin. So again, it turns into that snowball effect. But once we're kind of involved, and we call them frequent flyers because we tend to get the same clientele coming back because the situation might improve for a while. They go to the hospital, they're not doing well. They start to restore their health. We get some services in the house, things improve. We can then back out. We can keep a case open for about 18 months if we need to. But if after 3 or 4 months, someone says, no, my medical status is clean. You've got me Meals on Wheels. I've got a caregiver coming in for a couple hours a week. I don't need any more help. But what do we know with a lot of diseases or medical conditions, or just the simple process of aging, things continue to deteriorate, or as we age, we slow down. Maybe we need more caregivers coming into the house during the day or the night. Then that's when we get called back in to do a reevaluation. Hey, we're still seeing the same problems. What can we do to now increase the responses?
Very good. And I'm aware of there's over 20,000 people fed, 25,000 people cases, multiple counties served. I mean, this is really a great service to the community. How is the program funded?
The state typically issues and awards the contracts to the agencies. So when we do our investigations and our monthly contacts and working of the case, we call it, we bill the state on a monthly basis. So typically we get our funding through the state of Illinois. There are also federal grants that the different agencies apply for that federal money to assist with services in the community. I mean, that's what we pay our taxes for. What additional services are in the country or in the state or in the county that we can provide or ask the federal government to fund where we see a need. That's why we do a lot of a statistical gathering with the demographics of people. So we're trying to understand what groups have been missed or underserved, and how better can we improve those services across the board. We want to help everybody. Everybody, as Americans, we're all entitled to the same quality services and care across the board. It's just a matter, we're still at that time in our country's time frame in history. For some it's better, for some it's not so good. So we're trying to level that playing field.
Very good. Does the organization accept donations and or volunteers?
I believe all agencies would accept any donations that could be made. There are volunteers, I think, for even on Meals on Wheels. I think a lot of the drivers could be considered volunteer personnel. So if anybody wants to get involved in anything in the community, just contact whatever service that would interest you. So often everybody wants to do the perfect right thing. You don't have to do the perfect right thing. Just do something at a local level to improve our world. That's all we ask from anybody.
Absolutely. And I couldn't have said it better. That was a terrific comment. So what final thoughts can you offer about protecting at-risk populations? Maybe I didn't ask you something that I should have asked you, because you're more the expert, definitely more the expert than I am. I'm just the interviewer, but this is your world. So what final thoughts can you offer, or tips and tricks can you explain to the listeners?
I guess it would be hard to put my finger on any one thing. Getting back to the mandated reporters. So the mandated reporters are legal professionals. They're law enforcement, they're fire personnel, EMT, nurses, doctors. That does not mean that an average person who sees something questionable shouldn't be calling us. If you think that something's going wrong or someone's being hurt or neglected, call us and report it. It's up to us to then determine whether or not this is a problem and whether or not we could try to improve that problem. I would say it's better to err on the side of caution, make the call to see if anything is going awry. At least that clears your conscience. And even And a good portion of the cases we investigate, there is either no indication of what happened because, as with anything like a car accident, what do they say? It's a snapshot in time that anybody who saw it sees it from a different angle. It's just like real life. If we see someone yelling at an older person, we may misconstrue it as neglect or someone being abusive, when in reality, what could it be? Maybe the person has a hearing problem. They left their hearing aids at home, and that person has to make a louder intonation with their voice to be heard. So there's always a lot of difference between what is reported and what is actually occurring. And a lot of that is also based on self-determination. So I want to make it clear what we can and can't do when we talk about this. So self-determination is one's ability to live their life in the pursuit of happiness, just like the Constitution says, without any interventions or any interruptions from any outside person or agency. Meaning this: you may be an at-risk person. Maybe you're not making the best decisions. Maybe you're living in a hoarder's house. That's your right. Now, would outside agencies have a problem with a hoarder's nest? Of course we would. But if a person chooses to live that way and they're not endangering themselves or anyone else, there's little we can do if the person exercises their free will and says, in my self-determination rights, I want to be left alone. We would then back out of a case. Now, there comes the splitting of the hair, and this is one thing I really want to talk about when we talk about other potential scams. One loses their right to self-determination when they're deemed not competent, or their capacity has been diminished to the point where they cannot solve complex problems or make legal decisions any longer. Okay? That typically is what everybody understands when they say, "Oh, why don't you guys just get them a guardian? They're not. They've lost their mind." Well, no, they have to be deemed to have that lack of capacity by their physician and or neuropsychologists. Two people need to sign off on those documents to agree. Hey, we don't feel that they no longer have their capacity based on the questions they answered on these screening tools. So therein lies the problem. Well, then who makes the decisions in that person's best interests moving forward? So therein lies where everyone thinks that the power of attorney agreement is the solution. Now, power of attorney agreements are fantastic, but they cannot be made when a person is already suffering cognitive decline or has already been deemed not competent or has that lack of capacity. So you can sign a power of attorney agreement up until that point. The problem with the power of attorney agreements are they typically only go into effect. There's two ways for them to go into effect, and this is very important for listeners to understand. If you sign a power of attorney agreement, it typically only comes into effect when, for example, you fall into a coma and someone needs to make decisions for you medically. You end up being found non-decisional by a physician or a neuropsychologist. That means you can't make legal decisions anymore. Someone now needs to make those decisions on your behalf in your best interests. The other option, you can tick one of two boxes, is this document can come into effect immediately. Meaning, if they tick that box, the power of attorney agreement immediately goes into effect, and whoever was appointed that power of attorney now has full responsibility to do whatever they think in the person's best interest. Now, here's where the problem comes in. Too many people think that just because they become power of attorney, that it's payday. Now I can move the mom's house or dad's house into my name. I don't want them driving anymore. I'm going to sell off all the cars. I'm going to pocket all the money. Now, these are the worst case scenarios. This doesn't happen every time, but we're seeing it more often than not. They come in, they start doing some nominal chores around the house. Then they pay the bills, and then they say, well, no one's watching. I'm the power of attorney. I'm going to pay for my groceries when I go out to get my parents' groceries. Then they say, well, I'm taking them to the doctor. I'm burning up my car. I'm going to go buy myself a new car because I'm transporting them back and forth. So it can be something that gets abused very quickly, and we're seeing it more and more and more, to the point where I've gotten onto a coalition here in Lake County that just started, where we're going to try and work closer with law enforcement and the district attorney to report cases of neglect and financial exploitation, so that we can try to get charges issued against these wrongdoers, in hopes, A, that they can get the restitution for the money that was taken, B, try to get that person legally eliminated from that role, and C, send out the notification to the rest of the community. Hey, they're not fooling around anymore. My cousin got away with this, my best friend got away with it, but I didn't. And then that person tells their friend, and they say, gee, my friend didn't get away with it. I'm thinking about doing it. Maybe I ought to rethink it. Okay? We need power of attorneys. We need good people to take care of people. So don't think the power of attorney agreement is always a device that can be used for good. It can be used against somebody very quickly. And if you don't have access to funds to get an attorney to fight for you, it can become a very drawn out mess. And really the only way to then combat it is through the legal system. Someone would then try to have to go for guardianship over that person, which that's a several $1,000s process through the court systems. Everyone needs an attorney at that point. So I always urge people, almost exclusively, I'll end every statement with, have you consulted with an attorney? Have you sought out legal counsel yet? I cannot urge that enough at every juncture of anything someone does that could possibly jeopardize your finances, your home, your health care, or anything in between. Because once someone's got their name on those accounts, once someone has their name on that power of attorney agreement, you've given them legal approval to basically do whatever they see fit. Now, it turns into a degree of, well, how can the law prove it? Well, with everything being electronic now, the paper trail is almost irrefutable, especially with, a lot of the cash withdrawals from ATM. They got a camera on them. Every time someone takes someone's credit card and uses it that way, we've got a picture. So it's become a point now. What are we going to do as agencies to coalesce, to work together to now start charging people for these wrongdoings? And that goes from caregivers abusing people, to sons and daughters neglecting people's needs, to people taking advantage of the elderly financially.
Very good. And how would someone be able to report an issue? Where would they go?
So there are websites. If one has access to the internet, you could always pull up the Illinois Department on Aging. There's a website on there. I just came from a conference. The federal government is attempting to make this thing electronic in the future. So you don't have to even call us. There's going to be a website. You can report it through a website. But for all intents and purposes now, there is a hotline listed on the IDOA website indicating how you would be able to get So there's three ways we typically get reports, and one is through the IDOA hotline or helpline. There's also other agencies have after-hour phone numbers that go to the Center for Prevention of Abuse. So if someone, say you're a nurse practitioner or a caregiver working second shift or third shift, all the agencies are closed after business hours, you can call one of those numbers. They've got 24/7 operators who would take your call at any hour of the night and then report it to us via email. And in the morning, we would get the report on our emails. That's a very, very quick and efficient way to go about obtaining that. On a more local level, I'm going to give you, your listeners, with some information for Lifescape. Our report takers at this time are out of the Rockford office. And the direct line to report any cases to Lake County would be area code 815-490-1125. So that number again is 815-490-1125. And that would connect you to our report takers in Rockford, who then would send the notices to the Lake County office so that we could become aware of whatever problems there are.
Terrific. Raymond, really appreciate you taking time to be on the show, and this is really critical. Hey, I'm aging too. We're all aging. I'm not quite. I'm still in the workforce, but and I'm probably younger than most people would think. But still, this is great stuff. Thank you very much for offering your thoughts, and hopefully this helps someone.
Yes, definitely. Glad to be here.
I want my listeners to know that this is my dream, teaching people about safety. If it weren't for you, if it weren't for my listeners, I couldn't live my dream. So on behalf of my family and myself, I want to thank each and every one of you for allowing me to live my dream. And I also want to continue to live my dream, and I'm excited to continue to spread the word of safety. Recently, I began a new service as a conference keynote speaker. So if anyone would like for me to speak at future events, or if anyone knows of an introduction or would like to discuss how we can work with one another, I'd love to do just that. The keynote speaking website is www.stress2logic.com. That is STRES2logic.com. If you're aware of any conference speaking engagements where you'd like to have me speak, I'd love an introduction. You can always share my electronic business card, which is Marcus Melnick, MarcusMelnick.com. Now, back to the show. Ladies and gentlemen, as we know, there are a ton of changes coming or happening in government, and I wanted to touch on one small thing as it relates to firearms, because the show is about firearms as well as personal safety. So if you've been following the news, Dan Bongino, who is a former Secret Service agent, and he also has a conservative radio show, has been made the deputy director of the FBI. And his past gun control stance has sparked a little bit of debate. So on February 23rd, last week, he was announced as the new FBI deputy director. And there's a ton of discussions because as a former Secret Service agent and political commentator, he's been vocal about his strong pro-Second Amendment views. His argument against gun control is deeply rooted in personal responsibility. And in a 2013 speech at a gun rights rally in Pennsylvania, he made it clear that he doesn't believe that government has the authority to regulate an individual's right to self-defense. He also said, quote, "I'm not asking you for your permission to defend." So he said that referring to his stance on gun, he was referring to his two daughters, actually. "That was given to me by God." This statement underscores a philosophy that the right to bear arms is not something granted by the government as an inherent right that should not be restricted. Very interesting stuff. One of his more striking assertions is that gun control is not about firearms at all. It's about people control. And he made this claim during the same rally. He said, quote, "This is never about guns. This is about attacking an idea, the idea of liberty and freedom. By framing gun regulation as an issue of government overreach rather than public safety, he aligns himself with those who view the Second Amendment as a safeguard against tyranny rather than merely a means to self-defense." This is interesting stuff. He also pushes back against the way gun rights advocates are portrayed in the media, and in a heated Fox News segment during the 2017 or following the 2017 Las Vegas shooting, he criticized what he saw as being condescending from gun control advocates. Stop talking to us like we're a bunch of gun-toting rednecks. I have kids too. His frustration highlights a key point in the gun debate. Many gun owners do not see themselves as extremists, but as responsible citizens who want to protect their families, which is very reasonable. The NRA and the terrorist label. Well, during the same Fox News segment, Bongino also addressed the accusations that the NRA and its members contribute to gun violence. He took issue with the social media hashtags like hashtag NRA terrorists, arguing that it unfairly targets law-abiding gun owners. So the country's sportsmen, fathers, mothers who want to protect all their kids all of a sudden were terrorists? He asked, emphasizing that law-abiding gun owners should not be blamed for the acts of criminals. Another area where he refuses to budge on government oversight is firearm purchases. He was asked whether a background check system should flag individuals who purchase large quantities of firearms in a short period. He said, "Why should I have to explain that to the government?" His stance reflects a fundamental opposition to measures that he believes unfairly burden law-abiding gun owners while failing to prevent criminal activity. So there you have it, folks. There's a lot more to this. You can always go on Google and look up his other views. However, I think we have some changes coming on. If you're really liking what I'm sending downrange, I would encourage you to look up Firearm Mentor on social media, X, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn. I put out firearm tips weekly. Also, you can always sign up for a firearms class at firearmmentor.com/classes. Those are my concealed carry. Or you can contact me via my electronic business card, which is marcusmelnick.com. Tune in next week. We have monthly concealed carry license CCL classes in the northwest suburbs of Chicago. Dates can be seen at firearmmentor.com/classes. If you have a question, we can be reached at www.firearmmentorcard.com. That is our electronic business card, has all of our contact information and links in it. It's the easiest way to get a hold of us. Until next time, stay safe out there, and I'll see you at the shooting range. This is Marcus Melnick from Firearm Mentor signing off. The views expressed are not those of local community broadcasting, WYML LP, or its management, volunteers, or underwriters.